I'm Professor Stephen Resnicoff. Stay tuned. Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're gonna watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug. Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. I am very, very thrilled to have with me Dr. Stephen Resnicoff. Baruch haba, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
He's been on our show before. Actually, the last time he was on our show was in Washington, D.C. And I'm so glad to have him on the show. He is a professor at DePaul University College of Law, where he's received numerous awards for his teaching and scholarship. He also serves as director of its Center for Jewish Law and Judaic Studies, the JLJS, which focuses on combating the growing scourge of anti-Semitism. And right now, with what's going on in the world, anti-Semitism is at its highest point since the Holocaust, as we know, since the October 7th terror attacks in Israel by Hamas. It seems to have opened the door for all the anti-Semites to let the world know who they are. Former chair of the Association of American Law Schools section on Jewish law, former chair of the Executive Board of Jewish Law Association, and current member of the Academic Advisory Board for the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights under Law. Dr. Resnicoff earned his Bachelor's of Arts at Princeton, Phi Beta Kappa, and JD at Yale, and received advanced rabbinic ordination, Yora Yadin Yadin, from the late sage Rabbi Moshe Feinstein of blessed memory. Rabbi Professor Resnicoff is the author and co-author of 5 books, including Understanding Jewish Law. More than 50 articles also have been written by him and book chapters. Much of his work focuses on the interrelationships between Jewish and secular legal systems. An internationally known scholar and lecturer, Professor Resnicoff's recent scholarship focuses on ethics and anti-Semitism, and he often hosts lectures and guests at the university, which he also is open often to the public and shares online for those who aren't able to come down to the university when these guests and speakers come. Today we're going to talk about something. Everybody has heard of BDS. BDS is boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning against Israel. It is a way of trying to hurt the Jewish people. It's an anti-Semitic thing that often comes up in college campuses, where the campus anti-Semites try and get the campus to boycott Israel, divest from Israel, and it makes sanctions. It's a terrible thing. Today we're talking about something similar and different. DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. DEI programs are promoted in recognition of the great many ways in which people differ from one another, and the fact that ignorance or misinformation about these differences often lead to unfair and hurtful treatment of people, resulting in inequitable results and ill will. And DEI programs were created to educate people about these differences, to ensure people are treated fairly, and to make all members of a particular community feel appreciated and respected. So if you hear DEI, it is not BDS. It's an important thing to understand. And Dr. Resnicoff is going to share with us a little bit about DEI, how diversity, equity, and inclusion are important, and how they are being used today as a positive element in some cases, and maybe even sometimes as a negative element in other cases, because it depends how you look at it. So tell us a little bit about the origin of DEI, who started it, how it's become more well known as time goes on.
Well, DEI, and I'm definitely going to use the acronym DEI rather than say all 3 words each time. So DEI was really created. I wasn't involved in the outset of it, but it was giving Dan Lechavschus giving credit to, assuming that people did it for the right reasons. It was because there were people who were disadvantaged. There was discrimination of various types of groups. It was thought that education, which is a Jewish solution to most problems, it would be a good way of combating this discrimination and making people feel, because when people would understand the reasons for some of the differences, they would be less critical of them. There would be more understanding of them. So the idea was that we should have a more harmonious community, whether that community is in the workplace, because businesses spend over $8 billion a year on DEI programming, or in college, where colleges are, it's a tremendous growth of investment in DEI personnel positions and programming. That these people in the respective communities, despite their differences, should be treated fairly, should feel at home, should get along. I mean, it's a great idea. Unfortunately, the idea and the reality are completely different.
Which is really what I was saying, that it was meant for positive, and somehow or another it turns negative along the way.
Absolutely meant for positive, at least that's what it was purported to be meant for. I'm not sure how many of the people at the outset had the ulterior motives at that time too, but let's assume that it was a good idea, and I think the way that you presented it, most everybody could agree that it would be something to be supported. Unfortunately, given the current situation and the prognosis for the future, I think the real problem real question for the Jewish community, and in fact for the white community as a whole, and I'm not saying Jews are part of the white community, Jews are a very different group, but in any event, the white community and the Jewish community should either, number one, urge tremendous integral changes in the DEI programming, or should actually call for it to be extirpated. More groups, Jewish groups, are calling for it to actually be eliminated. Now, I don't know. I think that if it could be eliminated, that would be the best solution. But I sort of feel that it's not going to get eliminated, and so maybe we should settle for the second best, which is to make it better and to make sure that it doesn't combat anti-Semitism. Excuse me, that it doesn't encourage anti-Semitism, but that in fact it combats it. By the way, University of Michigan DEI office sent out a letter last year talking about how they're going to encourage all sorts of things like anti-racism, and they're going to encourage anti-Semitism. So it's a mistake that I just read, because apparently it comes up, because most of the things that you want to promote is anti-racism, anti-hate, and somehow anti-Semitism looks like it's another one of those antis. But in any event, basically the problem is like this. The DEI programming is problematic for Jews in a couple of very, very serious ways, and there's no real hope on the horizon that it's going to get better. If people listen to and the harm from DEI is much greater, I think, than even from the BDS campaigns. And so if you haven't heard about DEI and haven't focused on it, this is surely the time to do so. If you listened recently to the 3.5-hour testimony of the 3 university presidents from MIT and from University of Pennsylvania and from Harvard before Congress, and I did listen to this 3.5 hours, you hear that DEI came up repeatedly in that conversation as well. So, for example, at Harvard, they have a DEI program, and Bill Ackerman, the billionaire philanthropist who used to support Harvard, said that he didn't realize until he read its mission statement that whole DEI program was not to protect all marginalized minority groups, but only certain ones. And it did not, Jews were part of the program. Asians were part of the program. So what is part of the program? So what happens is that DEI fundamentally assumes this intersectionality argument that there are only 2 groups of people in the world. There are the oppressors and there are the oppressed. And worse than that, if they think that all the oppressed are linked together, and that if you believe you need to defend the rights of one of the supposed oppressed or actually oppressed groups, that means you have to support all the other groups that are in that are so classified. And that's why you have Black Lives Matter and black groups supporting Hamas and supporting the violent Palestinian movement against Israel, because they think the world is just these two groups, and Jews are in the white group, and the oppressor group. The white oppressor, the white privilege, that's the oppressor group internationally, and so that puts all of the people of color, all those groups of people of color, and as well groups for people who are gay, groups for people who have different kind of gender identities. All of those groups have to come out against Israel and against Jews because they're part of that one group.
Even though, if you put them in the realms of a Hamas leadership, they would be destroyed.
Absolutely, they would be hanged or thrown off roofs. And many gay Palestinians flee to Israel to survive. Nonetheless, there's this, it's taken on, it's like a religion. It's this belief that really there's very little in connection, there's very little that relates Hamas to Black Lives Matter or to the situation of blacks in America. After all, there is slavery going on in the world, and it's perpetrated by Muslims against blacks, right? In several countries. Sudan it happened, and it's going on now. And yet, instead of speaking out against black slavery, Black Lives Matter people are talking about Israel. And there are black and Israelis, by the way, are at least half non-white.
That's right.
Right. So and there are black Israelis working in the army and working in every area. And there are, of course, Arabs and even Muslim Arabs in government throughout Israel, in the courts, in the legislatures. So, but anyway, this idea of that there's just these two groups, and so the DEI people look at those groups that they think that's their mission, that they're supposed to protect those particular groups, and so that's who they aim at. They aim at those groups. And the fact that anti-Semitism is disproportionately perpetrated by members of those groups, such as by blacks in America and by Muslim Arabs in America and around the world, they can't speak out against it because these are the groups that they're protecting. And now, of course, it's not all blacks, and of course, it's not all Muslims.
Of course not.
But it's many in terms of the actual attacks, physical attacks against Jews. The Jewish community rightfully is concerned about anti-Semitism from the right, but the anti-Semitism from the left is becoming increasingly pervasive. If you look, for example, in terms of DEI, Tabia Lee is a black woman who was the DEI director at a community college in California. On October 18th of 2023, she wrote an op-ed in this the New York Post. I know of her from a number of things she's written, a number of interviews of her. She was fired because she wanted to help the Jewish community at this community college. Let me just read a little bit from what she wrote.
Please do.
And this is October 18, 2023. I saw anti-Semitism on a weekly basis in my 2 years as a faculty diversity, equity, and inclusion director. In fact, I can safely say that toxic DEI ideology deliberately stokes hatred toward Israel and the Jewish people. I was hired to head the DEI department at Silicon Valley's De Anza College in 2021. As a black woman, I was the perfect person for the job, on paper. Yet I made the mistake of trying to create an authentically inclusive learning environment for everyone, including Jewish students. Turns out, a toxic form of DEI, which is more accurately called critical social justice, demanded I do the opposite. She was called dirty Zionist. She was called, and she was told that the whole purpose of the program was to decenter or decentralize whiteness, and these Jews were part of the white oppressed, white privileged group. It's Stanford University, and she calls for elimination of DEI. Alan Dershowitz calls for elimination of DEI. Barry Weiss, who resigned from the New York Times in response to the anti-Semitism that she experienced there, she recently wrote out calling for the elimination of DEI. I just quote her for a minute. "It's time to end DEI for good. The answer is not for the Jewish community to plead its cause before the intersectional coalition or beg for a higher ranking in the new ladder of victimhood. That is a losing strategy, not just for Jewish dignity, but for the values we hold as Jews and Americans."
Was there not, when DEI started, which, you know, the thought of it as I started out talking about it seems to have a positive connotation, was there not a set of bylaws or a constitution for it of some sort that said, you know, everyone should be included, equity should be for everyone, diversity means that everyone in a diverse way should be included? Was that not part of some kind of a code that was set up at the beginning?
Yeah, I think the answer is it was not. And what happens, let's go through this for a minute. One of the problems with DEI is its personnel. One of the problems with DEI is its ideology. And one of the problems is its implementation. But with respect to, for example, the people who are attracted to becoming personnel, to be chief administrators in DEI. And by the way, in colleges, there is a striking report by the Heritage Foundation as to the great increase in number of positions and expense invested in DEI programming on college campuses. By the way, I'm not going to talk about the business world, which is a separate subject, but which has its own problems with DEI. But in terms of the college campuses, you have many people coming from a background in social work. That's how the people who are attracted, many of the people are attracted. And unfortunately, social work colleges, social work programs, academic programs in the United States and in Canada don't teach anti-Semitism. So the people who are, so you have the problem with the personnel is at best that they're ignorant and they're not sensitive to what is anti-Semitism, how does it manifest itself, how can we combat it. They're ignorant, that's at best.
How is the requirement in education for Holocaust study in schools not rolling over into this education for people as they get older and go into higher education?
Well, I'm not sure how many of the people who go into Holocaust studies really go into the other kinds of things that would lead them to be DEI personnel. Mm-hmm. But second, a separate problem that we could talk about on a different occasion would be the problem with Jewish studies programs around the country. When there was great anti-Semitism, I don't know if you know, for example, at the University of Minnesota, or in, there was the professor in Jewish studies there who is an Israeli, spoke out about the fact that the Jewish studies program was silent. The Jewish studies academics, why? Because they're afraid. Because academia is blatantly anti-Jewish. It sounds ironic, with everybody knows who we're disproportionately represented in higher education. That's disproportionately, but given we have such a small proportion, that disproportionate, it still means we're minority to the people who are greatly anti-Semitic. And people, I know people at DePaul, professors, who are not obviously Jewish, their names are not obviously Jewish, and don't want to be identified as being Jewish. Especially those who don't have tenure yet. You have to be worried about retaliation. And not just retaliation, you have to worry about hatred.
So I wanted to ask you, because you brought that up, how is DEI actually, how is it manifested in DePaul itself, where you are? Now, one of our shul members, Dr. Burrell, is a math professor at DePaul. We know so many people in education at DePaul. You're a professor and the head of a Jewish department in DePaul. How does DEI manifest itself in your university? Or how is it put aside, one or the other?
Well, DEI manifests itself, first of all, in general. Well, actually, to answer more directly, I'll tell people that within the last couple of weeks, that's to say at the beginning of December 2023, Craig Klugman, a professor at DePaul, wrote an op-ed in the Chicago Tribune and talking about problem of DEI, and given at least one example of where a DEI trainer brought in from outside began a presentation supposed to be about DEI, talking about how he's so about this genocide by the by the Israelis against Palestinians. It has nothing to do with the agenda of DEI, nothing to do with it at all. And it was also not true. But in any event, and there were complaints, according to the op-ed, there were complaints made to the administration about this, and the investigation returned a conclusion that no reasonable person could have found this offensive. No reasonable person could have found this offensive. There are other instances that I've heard of at DePaul as well. But what happens at DePaul, as in most, New York Times says more than 50% of large schools, when someone applies for a position in the faculty, he or she has to submit a diversity statement. So it's not a question of just their merits and demerits, and not just their effectiveness as a teacher, or ineffectiveness as a teacher, but their ideology as to whether they buy on to this diversity, equity, and inclusion as it exists. Second, but we at DePaul, by the way, we have a new provost for DEI, Valerie Johnson, and I have great hopes that she's going to improve the situation. But as it is now, I don't think anti-Semitism, the students who come into the DePaul College of Law, and I think most of the other units, have to go through a diversity training. Just use diversity instead of DEI, but it's diversity training. Anecdotally, the ones that I've talked to, the ones that my fellow colleagues have talked to, say that they've never been taught anti-Semitism has never come up. It's not taught about. It's just not part of the program. There's no module in it. I can tell you that as faculty members, we are either required or strongly encouraged to participate in some in-person DEI kind of programming, but we've never had any programming about anti-Semitism. I know that I have tried to get I know that not just I, but others at DePaul have tried to get anti-Semitism modules into the DEI training, and we have not succeeded. It's possible that Valerie Johnson, as I said, the new provost for this, she has indicated some interest in doing that and making some changes, and again, that's why I may be hopeful for the future. But the trouble is not just the ignorance of some of the people. The problem is that many of the people in DEI are anti-Semitic. I mean, it's not just, like I said, at best they're ignorant, but at worst they're rapidly anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist, which often is the same, not always, but often is the same. And so they when they're focusing on what to teach, even if there would be a module on anti-Semitism, I don't know how it would be implemented, whether the personnel would really follow the book and teach it in a proper way. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. We only have a few minutes left, and I really want to just find out now, do you think that, you brought up some people who've come out, some famous people who have come out, like Dershowitz, with their opinions?
Before you finish, I should mention
Okay.
Abe Foxman, former head of the ADL, said just last week it has to be eliminated. The ADL doesn't say that. The ADL currently says we have to improve it. It has to be improved. But yes.
Yeah. So we've come out with people who've made these opinions. What's your opinion? What do you think the answer is? As someone who lives with this, who is able to intake what's going on around the world with DEI, as an educator, as a professor, what do you think the answer is right now? Are you on the elimination? Do we need to correct it because eliminating it won't end the anti-Semitism and the exclusion of Jewish people, which are supposed to be part of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. So by the way, diversity, it's not diversity as to ideas.
It's diversity of people.
Well, but people are different based on their ideas also, just like their culture, right?
Sure.
But there's no conservative diversity. It's overwhelmingly left-wing diversity. There's no diversity if you would write that you're against DEI, you don't believe in DEI in your application for a job, I don't know that you would be getting that job.
You mentioned about someone having to write a diversity paper statement. So I know my daughter, when she got her doctorate in pharmacy, she had to write a diversity paper before she got her doctorate. That was part of that process.
Right, it's a very strange thing. But so back to your question, I think that really the only real answer that would be effective is to eliminate DEI. Unfortunately, I'm not very sanguine about the chances of being, because it's a bureaucracy. It feeds on itself. There are people who have the whole career based on this now, right? And they have to base it. They don't want to. So there are administrators who have their career based on it. You have people who are deans for diversity. So it's hard to see them losing so much. It's like they're lobbyists for it. So I think, and in fact, could be part of the liberal Jewish community would be against it, because it sounds so right, and it does sound right, but it's not right. And I think that they really have to take immediate steps to improve it, to vet people, to make sure that they're not anti-Semitic, whether they're going to be personnel. To monitor them, to make sure that they didn't trick you, or they didn't change their mind once they got in. To have there are a number of organizations that provide modules and techniques for training about anti-Semitism. Frankly, I think the focus on Holocaust studies is misguided. It should be anti-Semitism studies. The Holocaust is not contemporary. It can be generalized to all sorts of other things.
But it's one element of anti-Semitism, a big one.
But it was one where we were victims. But it wasn't. This would be something where it's contemporary, where it's useful, and I think
affects the people today, because especially right now after the October 7th attacks, anti-Semitism
skyrocketed exponentially.
So, yeah. I want to thank you so much for being on the call, Dr. Stephen H. Resnicoff, professor at DePaul University College of Law. I really am so glad to have you back on. We haven't had you on the show since well before the pandemic, when we were in Washington, and I'd love to talk more about subjects like this with you, because you are the man who knows them, and I appreciate you coming on. You educated a lot of people about something they had no idea about, and I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remember, you can check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web.
Can I mention one thing more?
Yes, sure.
Just one thing is that I have a Facebook page, and on that page I have first thing on my first page is a link to a video, a 3-hour program we had on DEI programs. Can its anti-Semitic consequences be combated? And so you might want to look there for more in depth, with 5 speakers from around the country, including a professor of medicine at Stanford who had filed a complaint because he said that the DEI program at Stanford discriminated against him.
Wow. Very interesting. If you want to email Dr. Resnicoff or me, info@tvrabbi.com, I will forward the email to him. I'm sure he'll get back to you personally. And we hope to have educated you a little bit, and hope to see you next time right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
And I'm talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug on your TV show. Well, he's the rabbi for me. Anytime you need. You're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.
And I'm talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug on your TV show. Well, he's the rabbi for me. Anytime you need. You're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.